بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته أهلا وسهلا. Welcome to our next lesson on usul al-Shashi. So we're still doing particle as you are aware, and of course if you have questions you can reach out and I will be more than happy to help you where I can, inshallah ta'ala. We also have an advanced series of lectures appearing on my YouTube channel on Imam Sarakhsi. So of course this is Usul Shashi, which is meant to be a simpler text, but there is a series of videos that you can access if you wanted to on my YouTube channel, and you can, if you wanted to, of course, there's no compulsion, but if you wanted to, you can, of course, watch it there. Okay. Okay, so let me just make sure the screen is being shared. Share screen. Start broadcast. So you should, in a few seconds, see my screen, hopefully. I think you can now. So, Alhamdulillah, let's begin bi'iznillahi ta'ala. So, let me start with what we're hoping to cover today. We're covering the fourth particle, which is the particle bal. Okay, bal can be translated to rather, depending on the context. Let me start by giving you maybe an example that we can start with, just to dive into it really. That might be the better way. And then we can do the theory around it as we explore the particular case at hand. So say, for example, a husband says to his wife, okay, so similar example to before. A husband says to his wife, and in this particular scenario, we're going to say, let's just say for right now, that the marriage is unconsummated. Unconsummated. In other words, they haven't had intercourse. And that basically means it's only one divorce statement. So, for example, if he was to say to her, you are divorced, if he says to her, you are divorced once, rather, and this is where the bal comes in. So in Arabic, we have the bal, rather twice, right? What are the implications of this? And what if he had consummated the marriage? So let's look at another scenario. Consummated. And of course, if he has consummated the marriage, then there'll be three divorces. And he says the same thing. So we're going to look at this scenario and we're going to look at this scenario. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to try and tease out nuances, interesting nuances that might help us explore this topic a little bit more. So, before we go into more detail, we need to just get some theory out of the way. Now, normally, when we have bal, we use it for correcting an error. So, what that means is that usually the first thing it does is that because it's correcting an error, it's basically what we call replacing what was said before. So what was said before the bal, it's replacing it. So whatever comes after it, that's replace what follows it. Okay. Now, if it's the case, what we're really doing is we're taking back, right? We're taking back what was said. That's the first thing here. Now, the particle can act as a connector for both positive and negative sentences. So it's like the first part of the sentence, it's like someone says the first part of the sentences, they realize that that was not actually what they meant to be commuted. So by simply adding the particle bal, the correct information is then relayed, right, with an aim to replace what came before it. So for example, if I said Zaid helped rather bal Umar did, then the person only wanted to communicate that Amr helped, and the mention of Zaid was a mistake. Okay, so that's how it usually works. But we always have a however or exceptions. Now, this rule that we've just talked about now is only possible when it's possible to take back a statement, right? So when you can take back a statement here, okay. Now, if you can't take it back, so what if you can't or you cannot take back? What if you can't take back the statement? So then, if it's not able to, if you're not able to take the statement back, or it doesn't have the capacity to, and this is usually when it's what we call in grammar a jumla insha'iyya. Okay, I'll explain what that is in a second, just in case you're not aware. Jumla insha'iyya. Jumla insha'iyya is in English what we might call is a non-informative sentence. And a non-informative sentence is it's a sentence that doesn't permit the one who said it to be categorized not true or false. But we'll just put true or false. But it is basically the person that says it, you can't allow it to be categorized as truthful or deceitful or lying, if you like. Okay, so just to go back, the bal as the default is that it replaces what was said before, the sentence before it. But if it's a sentence that you can't take something back, which means that it's a jumla insha'iyya, a non-informal sentence, then what happens is it's not replacing anymore. It's purely a mere connector. It's connecting. We're going to see this in practice in a second. And so it's not replacing anymore. So here, the default is that it's replacing. But if we find that a sentence is a jumla insha'iyya, then we don't follow that and we say it's basically connecting sentence. So what that would mean is that both the preceding parts will be considered independent. Yeah. And will be merely joined. So what will happen is that both the preceding and the proceeding, so both parts will be basically considered independent. Let's put here both parts independent. Okay. So this is like the theory, this is the map, if you like. Okay, and they'll just be independent and therefore joined. It's different to the default, which is replacing. The bal will act as a form of joining together, and it will maintain both parts being independent. So let's go to our example and see how this would work in practice. So let me just get a different color pen. Okay, so in this case, let's go back to our first case. Husband says to a wife with whom the marriage has not been consummated, you are divorced once, rather, but twice. Okay, so there's only one divorce here. So what happens is that the net result is that there'll only be one divorce. Okay, when he says this. Why is that? Well, look at the sentence. Okay, because the marriage, of course, has not been consummated, and one irrevocable divorce will occur, and she can't be subject to more than one divorce. So all other sentences will be void. So this one here doesn't really matter. Yeah, because remember here, it's a jumla, what we call a jumla insha'iyya. So because this is a jumla insha'iyya, right? Now normally it would replace. Normally, if this was a jumla khabariya, this part here, rather, let's just do it again. If it was jumla khabariya, this part that comes after the bal would replace what is said before. If it was a jumla khabariya, because that's the default. But if you think about this sentence, you can't take it back because this is a jumla insha'iyya. Yeah, so we're not replacing here. It's going to be seen as a connecting sentence. So in this case, because it's a jumla insha'iyya, because we're not talking about something being true or false, right? So it's basically going to connect both of them together. So as soon as he says you are divorced, this part will be enacted because of the fact that it's a jumla insha'iyya. Very, very important. So the normal point is that you replace it. So what would normally happen is this sentence here would replace that one. But because you can't take it back, once you said you are divorced once, the divorce happens. So you can't take that back. And so it's a jumla insha'iyya. It's a non-informative sentence. It's not about something being true or false. So what happens is the bal acts as a connector. Both parts that are independent are joined together. So as soon as he says this here, the divorce happens. Does that make sense? So that's why it's connected to this one. Okay. Let me give you another. Let's build on that. So that's quite straightforward. And there's nothing I don't think too difficult for us to understand. It's also worth reflecting, and we'll come back to this later on. What you'll also see here is that you brought something into from non-existence to existence. Like there was no idea of a divorce, but once the husband says you are divorced, he's brought something into existence. So I want you to remember this as well. You brought something from non-existence into existence. Just keep that idea going for now, which will be useful in some of the examples that we might want to cover in the next few minutes, inshallah ta'ala. So let's go back to our next example, or let's pick on our next example. Let me take a red pen. So same sentence, you are divorced once rather bal twice. But this time, it's a husband who has consummated a marriage. Okay. So he's had intercourse with her. So he's now got 3 divorces. So in this case, all 3 divorces will occur. 3 divorces will occur. But think about this again, it's still a jumla insha'iyya. He's given 1 and then he's given 2. So the first divorce that he gave here, this one here, right? This is the first one that he gave, right? And the first one he's given cannot be repealed or replaced even, cannot be repealed. Let's put repealed here. Remember the type of sentence it is, right? It's not a jumla khabariyah. So when the husband says that, it's 1, of course. And then when he says the next one, but twice, right? What we'll do is, because we follow this idea of connecting, and this is a jumla insha'iyya, this will result in the other 2, which will give 3. Yeah. And because she is subject to 3 divorces, they will be enacted. So that's how it works. A bit of grammar is obviously important here, and that's important for you to bear in mind. I'll let you take that in for a second, maybe pause the video, and you can then think about it. But nothing difficult there. Just follow the logic through, follow the reasoning through, and you'll be able to make sense of it, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, let's build on that then. Now we've got the basic idea of how bal works, rather, and now we want to tease out some differences. Now, the 2 examples that we've used so far, they are of course to do with a jumla insha'iyya. They are to do with a jumla insha'iyya. Now, there's a different case which we can look at, which is the case of a confession. Now, remember this, what I said, non-existence to existence, and also this idea you are going to remember of taking something back. When you make a confession, if you think about it philosophically speaking, when you make a confession of something, are you taking something back or not? Right? When you confess to something, you're accepting something. So I want you to remember that for a second. So let's make a sentence up. Say someone says, I owe Harun I owe Harun £1,000 rather bal £2,000. Someone says this. Okay. Now this does appear as a jumla insha'iyya, but we've got to interrogate it a little bit more. We can't jump yet because think about it. When you say I owe Harun £1,000 rather £2,000, what kind of sentence is this? So we'll come to that. Okay. So what's happening here? So when someone confesses this, this won't mean, as we might think, that it's £3,000. This might be an instinctive answer, but that's not the right answer. Okay, he's not liable for £3,000. Okay, in fact, it will only be £2,000. Okay, I want you to think about that. Maybe pause the video and maybe have a think before I delve into the actual answer. So maybe have a think about it and see what you come out with, see what kind of reasons you come out with. Okay. So once you've done that, let's think about this. Now, our evidence for not owing £3,000 is that the particle bal, this particle bal, is here replacing. It's the default. It's replacing what was said before. So I owe Harun £1,000 rather £2,000. So this part is replacing what is said here. Okay? What precedes it, or what precedes it. This is the preceding sentence. This is the proceeding sentence. If you want to, get into it. Yeah. Why is that though? Right? Well, think about it. In a confession, by its very nature, what you're doing here, when you're in this preceding sentence, is you're admitting to something. You're not negating it. Yeah. You're kind of in this part, you're basically admitting. There's a form of admitting. Yeah. So you're not really making an error. You know how we said you're making error. You're not making an error because that would make it. If it was an error, it's a non-confession. Yeah. But here we're not talking about errors. We're talking about admitting something. Okay. So this means that we must keep the 1,000. We must keep the 1,000 as a confession. So this will be kept as a confession. Yeah. And this part here, the bal, is kept independent. We'll keep that independent, right? Because we said that's what happens, right? But it has to be part of the confession as well. So what we do is we extend 1,000 upon the first confessed 1,000, and so the independent sentence also holds true. The net result will be that this is a confession of 1,000 odd, right? Because he's confessing here to 1,000, as you can see, to 1,000, with another confession. Can you see? So there is a confession too. There's confession and confession. Of course, it's not going to be 3,000. I owe Harun 1,000. He's confessing to that rather 2,000. Okay. So in total, the confession amount is 2,000. Okay. Very, very important to bear in mind. And remember what we said, it's replacing. Because we're replacing the error in the first sentence. We're replacing the error in the first sentence. Yeah. So let's just go into a little bit more and just look at all of these examples together and see if I can fit this in, inshallah ta'ala. Now, the case of the confession, the one that we've just covered here, of course, is different to the example of the divorce. Yeah. Especially the one where we've looked at, let's just label them A, B, and C. It's different to scenario A because there was a marriage where it was unconsummated. Yeah. In a confession, we stated that the 2000 becomes necessary, but in the divorces, we do not say that the two divorces occur. Okay. Of course, the difference here is that issuing a divorce in a non-informative Jumla in Shia sentence, which brings a previously non-existent matter into the realm of existence. There was no divorce before the utterance of the words, and once they were uttered, their divorce came into being. You brought something into existence when you said divorce, like I said earlier. Yeah. But the confession is a khabar. Remember, khabar by nature is you're informing something, right? So this is a khabar going on here, right? This is relaying information that was already in existence. It was already, so you're kind of like relaying something that was already in existence in this case, prior to the words. The words merely validate a previously existing matter. So it's possible for one confessing to say, I lied, and the truth is like this. I lied, and the truth is this. I lied, now the truth is this. Because it's possible to negate a lie and replace it with a truth and informing. So this is what Jumla Khabariya is, because a Jumla Khabariya, right, a Jumla Khabariya, as you know in grammar, is different to Jumla Insha'iyya. Jumla Khabariya is that one that admits true or false, or true or lie, as opposed to Jumla Insha'iyya here. That's the whole point. So it's a Jumla Khabariya. So you're replacing, okay? But in an Insha sentence, the two above, there's no element of error, and you can't replace it. You can only replace something when there's an error. Yeah. So once you bring something into existence, you can't take it back to non-existence. In the case of C, whereas in A and B, you brought something into existence. Yeah. You can make an error when informing, but not otherwise. So when an error is possible, its correction is also possible. So when you say I made an error here in I owe Harun 1,000, but rather 2,000, right? Then error is possible and you can correct it. Because in the confession, the confessor has given information so that we are able to say he made a mistake by saying I owe 1,000 and made an error by adding rather 2,000, right? So this results in 2,000 being necessary. But because in the case of divorce, it's a Jumla Insha'iyya, we have said that when the husband says, you are divorced once, to the wife with whom the marriage is not consummated, one divorce occurs instantly. Yeah, bringing something to existence that wasn't there before. He's bringing in the idea of the existence of a divorce. You can't correct this, even if it's correct, even if it's uttered by mistake. And when he says rather twice, this is going to be void anyway, because he's only entitled to one. Yeah. That's worth noticing, and a final point here, inshallah, will end there for today, is that if the divorce is delivered in a manner where it was, where it becomes informative, so it becomes a khabariyah. So if this was delivered, if it was delivered, just stretch the example a little bit more. So Jumla in Shia at the moment, but say you delivered the divorce in such a way that actually it's a khabariyah. Yeah. Something that's already known and you're just relaying it. Yeah. and somebody says, for example, so let me give an example. Say, let's just do an example just to help you. Say let's do example D here. Say this now appears, the same example, but this appears as a khabariya now, yeah, as opposed to A and B. So if, say, for example, someone says, I have divorced you once yesterday, rather, but twice. Okay, now that comes across, that's a khabariya. So it's no longer it's giving information about something that already exists because it happened yesterday. He divorced her yesterday. In this case, right, this will become twice because it's the same idea as the confession, right? The bal is replacing. You can replace something that's seen as a khabar, something that's already in existence, because you already divorced her. You divorced her yesterday, and now you're saying rather twice, and because it's you're not bringing it into existence. You're not saying you are divorced one. You're saying I have divorced you yesterday. So that's how bal works. I'll stop there, inshallah ta'ala, because the next one, which is lakin, is quite long, and we need more time to cover it. So we'll do that next lesson, inshallah ta'ala. We'll stop there. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.